What's up there, YouTubers? I'm Pruitt. This is Jim Davis, and today on WebDM, we're going to be slithering and oozing through the dungeon with pudding, oozes, jellies. It's going to be gross. It's going to be great. WebDM. Eh?
Works. It gets us there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slide right into this conversation about oozes.
Yeah, about oozes.
Yeah.
Ooze right on into it.
Oh, yeah. Oof.
So oozes are a weird monster, right? They're
Right.
sentient snot,
Yeah.
gross little slimes and jellies and things. They're a monster that I look on in D&D. I see monsters that are clearly designed for a subterranean dungeon environment.
Oh, yeah.
They look like glistening puddles on the ground, or they
Pools of oil.
or just hide in the shadowy crags along the wall before they lash out a pseudopod at you. And then the second thing that gets to me is that they're also like this weird dungeon sanitizer.
Well, yeah, somebody's got to do the dirty work, right?
They exist alongside this sort of trio of other monsters in the monster manual that are basically there for your sanitation needs. The Otyugh, the Shambling Mound is your animated compost heap. Gelatinous Cube is your toilet, basically. And so in that respect, they're kind of gross and weird and a little silly. But at the same time, if you think about what the oozes are doing and how they attack you, there's also this angle to them that's like body horror and mutilation, and like an attack by these creatures is not pleasant.
No.
And
You're being burned with acid.
you're being dissolved with acid.
You're going to end up looking like Hicks at the end of Aliens.
And that's if you survive an attack by one of these things. And so I think it's one of these monsters where the D&D combat and injury system doesn't quite do them justice.
Yeah.
Because it's like, all right, the black pudding lashes out at you, partially engulfs your arm, and the painful sensations shoot up as it strips the flesh away, and takes 7 damage. And it's just kind of like, it's one of those things where the narrative of D&D and the sort of the fictive space that's going on, or whatever, I don't even know if that's a word.
Fictive?
Maybe. Who the hell knows? When we're in combat in D&D, we're all sort of imagining the same thing. And yet there's these rules, hit points, armor class, that sort of abstract everything out.
Right.
And I find that the oozes are one of those creatures where the abstract nature of D&D combat just doesn't do these monsters justice. They're horrific monsters.
Yeah, they're eating away all your stuff, and then you're next.
Yeah.
So does it then fall on the DM's shoulders to make sure to impose that kind of horror? Like really show, like as it's attacking you, you see your armor stripping away. I mean, like, how do you bring that to a more chilling effect that you're going for?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How do you make that 7 hit points seem like so much more?
Like it's a big deal. I've tried a lot of different things. There's descriptions, of course, and I think DMs will find for themselves. Some DMs prefer a lot of description, some DMs prefer less. I've certainly played at tables where it's all numbers and there's no descriptive anything going on. No one's describing what their actions look like. No one's describing the effects of their actions. It's, I got this to hit, this one. And that's okay. It certainly speeds up the game. But for myself, I like to sort of describe what an action is like when it's resolved, and let the players describe what their actions look like as they're being resolved. And so I think maybe having some good descriptions in of, all right, your hair is melting off, and this gelatinous sort of sticky substance is clinging to you as it burns. I think impressing upon that, and then trusting that your players are going to role play appropriately, and the fact that there's this abstract combat system that exists alongside of it is just like, well, this is just the game and how we're resolving actions, but let's try to stay in this headspace of what might be a very horrific encounter for your party.
The proof's in the pudding, so let's get to them. The black pudding.
I mean, it's one of those monsters where it dissolves flesh, bone, metal, and wood. Not every ooze has that much of effect on inorganic material.
Yeah.
So the black pudding is one of those where it's like, it's coming after you. The only thing this doesn't dissolve is stone. It's going to hide in cracks and crags. Maybe it drips down on the party or falls in a giant, wet, snotty sheet on top of them. Maybe it rises up out of what they think is just a dark puddle of water or something in a dungeon, and attacks them. And so, the fact that it splits
Yeah.
It takes certain types of damage, lightning or slashing. The fact that it dissolves so much. The fact it dissolves wood, it dissolves metal. You can't bar a door against this thing. You can't throw up a shield to try to stop it. It's going to eat through all those things eventually.
Yeah, your shield's going to take 2 hits and be gone.
Right, and then your forearm is going to be next.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the Black Pudding is a rather rough monster and can even challenge parties up in the higher tiers if you, say, make the Black Pudding a little tougher, or you imbue it with the spirit of Dweeblix and give it some kind of sentience or maybe psychic abilities. That's how I would use a Black Pudding to kind of challenge a higher level party, or just have it be present amongst other things that they have to deal with. You have a particular interesting experience with a Black Pudding from one of your characters, yes?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. I had, a Solaria Shadowfall, my awesome female elven monk, who happened upon, and this was in 3rd edition, right?
Yeah, this was 3rd edition.
Yeah, 3rd edition. Happened upon some boots of striding and springing.
And it's specifically 3.0.
3.0.
Not 3.5. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we've told the story before. Yes.
But yeah, so she's the one that could run like whole football fields and then attack. And used a bow, and we just kiting and peppering.
Yeah.
And we took out a bunch of giants. But the DM was frustrated with how I was using my items
boots of striding and springing,
to effect. And so we enter a dungeon, and immediately a Black Pudding, like a big one, drops down right on top of me.
Right.
And immediately, and this is 3rd edition, so he starts making saves for everything. I got scalded, yeah.
You survived.
I survived, but every item I had, except for my boots of striding and springing, was melted off of my body. And I'm just a naked elven monk with my awesome boots.
But you're just fine.
I'm just fine.
You're a monk.
And so I took the hint, and then I just became crazy Liu Kang, like bicycle kicking across rooms and stuff. And karma's a bitch sometimes, so don't be a dick.
I think it goes to show you, the Black Pudding is like, say, the Rust Monster or the Ethereal Filcher, or a certain class of monsters that is an in-game corrective to a DM problem.
Right.
A magic item doesn't enter into your game unless you say okay.
Right.
And so sometimes you might look at a magic item and go, that's not going to be a problem. And then it's only until a player gets a hold of it and combines it with something that you weren't thinking about that it can become a problem. And to me, I see those as like, well, you can always just take the player aside and say like, hey, this one magic item is really killing my mojo over here. Can we do something about it? But there's this class of monsters that exist to handle that problem in game.
Yeah, they're gonna take your stuff.
They're gonna take your stuff. They're gonna dissolve it. They're gonna eat it away or filch it from you while you sleep and then escape into the ethereal plane. That's one of 2 ways to handle it. My preferred method is just talk to your player.
Yeah.
But the Black Pudding is obviously an option for DMs who feel like they need it. And it's a pretty nasty monster.
Yeah, it is pretty nasty. Now, the gray isn't as bad.
Not as bad.
It only affects metal.
It only affects metal, and it's got kind of like, it's not so much of an oozing, creeping sort of horror. It's more like I think of gray ooze, I think of the things in the abyss, even though they sort of resemble maybe water weirds, but they also sort of like this weird, the Abyss, the movie, not necessarily for our viewers. I'm talking about the movie, not necessarily the plane of chaos and evil.
Yeah, watch the director's cut. It's much better.
But visually, that's sort of what I'm thinking of. These sort of pseudopod things, snake-like creatures that come out after you. Grey Ooze can be a good monster to have in just any sort of natural stone environment. And of course, that goes with any of these monsters. The oozes, and there's other classes of them, creatures that look like other things, or there's this whole class of dungeon monster that creates an environment where it seems like it's safe. Doesn't look like there's anything in that corridor.
No, not at all.
There's nothing in that room. But then you get in there and the oozes come out of the cracks and crags, and the furniture gets up and starts to come and attack you. So I don't know, that's sort of how I would use Grey Ooze. Attack the party that way, sort of use its camouflage ability, the fact that it can look like stone or water or something like that.
The lesser is the ochre jelly, which, it still has spider climb. It still has split.
It still has spider climb and split, but it's not the most horrifying of all the oozes. Maybe you want to use one of these monsters and you don't want to overwhelm the party with it. If you're playing with a group of players who are new to D&D, an ooze monster might really throw them off.
Right.
Because they might just psych themselves out or think like, well, we can't just hit it. with our weapons. And certainly sometimes you hit it with a weapon and your weapon starts dissolving.
Right.
Then
it's not magical, yeah.
Then you want to, that's going to certainly throw you off. And Ochre Jelly is a monster you can throw at the party if you're like, I want to use one of these monsters, but I don't want to just overwhelm them yet.
Not yet.
Let them figure it out.
Yeah.
This is the moment where they figure out how oozes and jellies and the like work.
But its split ability still might freak them out a bit.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, we hit this and it just becomes 2.
And it just becomes 2.
Yeah,
and I've seen it plenty of times where the monster itself is nothing. And if the party just stuck around and hit it, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But the party freaks themselves out. They don't know what the monster does. They've never read the monster manual. They've never fought one of these monsters before. It's a bit of metagaming that happens to produce the desired effect in game of players who are like, well, we can't defeat this thing. We got to run.
Right.
It's like, guys, it's just a jelly.
It's just a jelly.
It's all right.
Get some peanut butter and have a picnic. Come on. So let's move on to the king.
Yes.
The king of all oozes.
The king of all oozes.
The Gelatinous Cube.
The Gelatinous Cube, the giant Jello mold.
Oh my God.
And so I love the Gelatinous Cube because it's a monster that can only exist in D&D.
Right.
It perfectly fits the dungeon corridor. Crystal clear. You can't see it. It's difficult to see. It's difficult to detect. It doesn't mess with any of your stuff.
No.
So it's like even if a companion or a henchman or something dies to a Gelatinous Cube, you can at least like kill the cube and take the stuff back. So it like shows you where the priorities in D&D are, not necessarily on the player characters, but on their gear.
Yeah, well, you got to have that left behind. Come on.
Yeah. Otherwise, players will cry foul.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Never mess with a player's gear. They get very territorial about it.
Yeah.
And so the Gelatinous
pudding.
Cube, here's the ideal encounter for a Gelatinous Cube.
Yeah.
The party's walking down a corridor in a dungeon, dim torchlight playing off the walls, creating weird shadows. The party scout sees a skeleton walking down the hall. It's just like, there's just one skeleton, and an impulsive member of the party goes up to attack it. The barbarian, the fighter, the whatever. They run smack headlong into a wet wall of Gelatinous Cube ooze.
Yeah.
And then that party member's like engulfed, taking damage. The rest of the party freaks out. They thought they were just going to fight a single skeleton. They bolt out of there. That's kind of the ideal in scenario for one of these things, and how I would use the monster itself, and particularly if it was with a group of players new to D&D or players who were really into role-playing, sort of like novice adventurers. You can have a moment where you're like, wait, what is this coming at us? Like, it looks like one thing, but it's actually another. I don't know. That's why I really like the Gelatinous Cube. That and monsters lure them into pits so that they can crap on them.
Well, they do make for great waste disposal, okay?
Right.
And why not? Somebody's got to do the job. Like, I love the idea of a wizard commissioning a party.
Yeah.
And he tells them, there's a Gelatinous Cube over here.
Right.
I need you to lure it over here to
Over
this.
here.
It's very important.
Yeah.
And so they go through this, maybe somebody, who knows, they go through this harrowing thing to lure a Gelatinous Cube over to this one specific spot, and it turns out to be a pit, and it's just the wizard making a new outhouse.
He's just taking a new outhouse.
And he doesn't tell them that till the very end, and they go through all this.
Why would he explain it to him? He's a wizard.
Exactly. You just do the thing. The movie The Blob is a great example.
It's a perfect example for these kinds of monsters.
Whether the original or the remake.
Right.
They both have a charm. I mean, just the idea of just being taken into something and slowly eaten away.
Slowly being dissolved, while your companions are able to watch it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I look at D&D combat, and I look at the monsters that are in the monster manual, and in a lot of ways, it's very sanitized. It's heroic. Right. The party is meant to conquer and is meant to overcome.
Right.
And so the monsters in the monster manual, even though they're armed with giant axes and swords and claws and fangs, they can burn you and scald you and dissolve you.
Yeah.
It's just some hit points. So I start to think of like other game systems that have a much more detailed injury mechanic, and that really go into the details of like what happens to your characters when they fight these monsters.
Like in Warhammer?
Like in Warhammer is the biggest one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Particularly that injury table made by the trauma surgeon that we used.
Oh my God.
So
Is that where Josh's character cut his own foot off?
yeah, he had to cut his own foot off, perform surgery on himself. Maybe we'll do an episode on Warhammer one day.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of those things where I like to imagine this as a real place that exists. It's part of the fun of it for me is to just try to forget as much as possible that this is a game. And it's instead like, how would you react to that? And oozes are one of those creatures that I just can't imagine a sane person going, yeah, I'll fight an ooze. That's okay. I got this, guys. Like, you just like, what is this thing? It's a puddle.
Yeah.
It's a snot wad you're trying to fight.
Right, and you know, pardon the pun, but you slip up,
Right.
and things can go bad really quickly, and
things
you
go very
guess what?
bad.
You just lost your armor.
You just lost your armor. You
Oh,
lost your weapon. Now
it
you're
actually hit
engulfed.
you. Oh, well, your armor's gone now.
Yeah, and so it's one of those creatures where, you're fighting orcs and they're hacking away at you with machetes and axes, or you're fighting a dragon and it's taking a chunk out of you with its bite. But for some reason, the creatures that dissolve you and digest you while you're still alive are the creatures where I'm like, that's too much.
Yeah.
Like, it triggers my body horror or whatever thing going on. You're just like, that's crazy.
Yeah. No, I'm completely with you on that. It's they should be used more.
Yes.
Than they are in dungeon settings.
Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of an issue sometimes, right?
I think it's one of those creatures that gets overlooked. It's either seen as too complicated, or at least that's how I saw it in previous editions. And I talked to a lot of DMs, and they'd be like, "Yeah, there's all these special rules for Oozes." 5th edition simplifies a lot of it, and just like really streamlines it in terms of what they're immune to, what you can do to them, how you attack them. But also at the same time, they're not like the central creature of any dungeon. They're not going to be the central thing that you build a dungeon around. And so, what if you did? What if you just decided that this is going to be my ooze dungeon? Maybe it's a temple to Dweeblix that has a bunch of sentient and psychic oozes that are there, and they're all in different pits, or it's a cult devoted to Dweeblix where they breed and create special kinds of oozes. And so you're dealing with like vats and pits full of ochre jellies and even green slime, which is not even in the monster manual, it's in the DMG. Or something like the Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventure, The God That Crawls, which is like, there's one monster in this thing. It is a gargantuan ooze that can seep under doors, that knows where you are, and is moving at you 30 feet at a time. So you can outrun it, but you better not get cornered. Yeah. You better not accidentally walk into it, because it's silent. You're not really going to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter that this giant thing is coming after you, and you better hope you can outrun it and get out of there.
Oh, it's like a horrific ooze D&D version of It Follows.
Right. It's just absolutely gross.
Just a slow, stoic stalk right towards your death.
Yeah, and so I mean, these monsters aren't particular. They rely on you not seeing them or you stumbling into them, because for the most part you can outrun them.
Yeah.
I mean, even the king of all oozes, Dweeblix, is one. CR 20 something. I forget what exactly is right off the top of my head, but it's only got a movement of 30 feet. And no other really, you can easily outrun this thing. And so they're deadly because they surprise you, they get the drop on you, sometimes quite literally.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they're a monster that I'd like to see more of, and I'd like to see become more central focus in some D&D adventures. And at the very least, Out of the Abyss gives us some really good ideas for how to incorporate oozes and jellies and slimes into a campaign.
Hey, and they need all the help they can get.
They need all the help they can get. I don't know if we want to talk about the fact that they're elemental spirits. The monster manual says they're all earth elementals, but I also kind of like the idea that each golem is attuned to a particular element. So like, maybe clay is attuned to water.
Yeah. Metal is
certainly
lightning.
It's certainly immune to acid and things like that.
Metal could be fire or lightning.
Metal is definitely fire because it is not harmed by fire. In fact, it might get hit points back if it takes fire damage. Stone is just a lot of them have lost their big immune. It used to be like you just couldn't touch a golem with magic. Period.
Gym clap one time. Lock your chair so you don't swing back in the chair too much.
Well, it is locked. It's just...
Try not to swing back in the chair too much.
Okay.
You good?
Looking good here, guys. Let's shoot the web DMs go. Can we spill some dice out
Oh yeah, that's what I was...
into this area? These need to come
I don't know if I have my. If we want any more of those dice over there.
Alright, so you can even pick it up where you're doing the dice.
What are we talking about first?
Well, do we want to do oozes? We'll do the three
Just a
monsters.
little to your right.
Good.
Don't go any further.
Stay in your place, Guinevere.
Know your place, Guinevere.
Does that look good?
Guinevere.
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 Oh, don't want to lose the tiny dice. They've been too good to me over the years. There we go. That looks placed yet haphazardly spilt. Does it look like the dice bag vomited? That's what I was going for. Yeah. Let's see. Oozes. Good?
I'm good here, folks, whenever you're ready.
So, Jim,